Hi, welcome to the Divine Insight Show. Thank you so much for joining us wherever and whenever you're doing so. I'm excited that you're here with us today. I'm excited to bring some incredible guests to you talking about some wonderful things that are going on in the world of science and health and wellness, and in particular, things that are so important for us to think about right now. At this time that we're all facing social isolation, major losses, and extreme disruption of life caused by the pandemic, has resulted in increased levels of stress hormones and various intense emotions, including sadness, grief, sorrow, fear, worry, anxiety, panic attacks, hopelessness, helplessness, loneliness, disconnection, and depression. But worse, this in turn affects us in our ability to sleep, keeping us awake at night, suppressing our immune system, making people even more susceptible to the virus. But we have two experts here today to talk about how to break that cycle of stress and sleeplessness that can so damage your health. Dr. Patrick Wanis is a renowned human behavior expert who has appeared on such networks as CNN, BBC, Fox News, and MSNBC, and is recognized for his subconscious rapid transformation technique. He's going to talk with us about those things that we can do to ease back into a peace of mind. And Chris Burres is a scientific researcher who's pioneered the use of an astonishing molecule called ESS60 that we're going to learn a lot about today, that has some amazing properties which include enhancing sleep and boosting immunity. Today, he's here to relate the shocking story of how this molecule's abilities were discovered by a Nobel Prize team and what role he's played in its advancement, and also what implications are for human health and longevity. And they've teamed up here today to bring us new solutions for restoring your state of health and sleep during this challenging time. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Travis, for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, you bet. I'm so excited. So let's just dive right in. Dr. Wanis, as we were talking before the show, I noticed that you sound a bit like you're from Australia. Am I right?
Yes, from Melbourne, Australia. And very happy to be here and part of your show.
That's so funny timing-wise. I actually was in a long-distance relationship from a guy in Melbourne for a year, so I'm a little bit more familiar than I guess a casual person. And what about you, Chris? You're from Texas?
I am from Houston, Texas.
Right on. Well, both of you, welcome. I'm excited to talk with you today. So let's start with you, Dr. Wanis. What is a human behavior expert?
Well, basically what I do is study what motivates you to do the things you do. Why do you do the things you do? And then if we can work out why you're doing the things you do, we can help you to change the way you think and feel, and ultimately your behavior and then your results. Because everyone ultimately really wants to change one of two things: the way that they feel, and think, and obviously their results. So the idea is, can we work out what motivates us? And let me be very brief about this, because there are three sort of key theories. It was Viktor Frankl who said, we're motivated to search for meaning. It was Nietzsche who said, well, we're motivated to seek power. It was Freud who said, well, we're motivated to seek out pleasure. And I believe it's a combination of all three, but meaning is an important part of it.
Interesting. Yeah, it reminded me of college when I first started to take psychology, because I thought I wanted to be a psychologist, and we were talking about the brain and the id and all of that, and I just was like, I don't know if this really resonates strongly with me. So I actually majored in sociology, thinking about the group dynamics and how we behave in relation to our others. So I'm really excited.
The best study is to combine all of those. You want to study evolutionary biology, you want to study evolutionary psychology, you want to study sociology, you want to study the brain, because today more than ever, we really understand the brain better than before. And that gives us great insights into why we're doing what we're doing, and how by also tapping into the way our brain operates, we can change the way we think and feel and the way we behave. And ultimately, one of the things that we're talking about today, to handle our emotions, to sleep better, to build our immune system.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now, Chris, to you, how did you become a research engineer?
So really, I studied mechanical engineering in college, and I bumped into who is now a guy who is now my business partner, Robert Wong, in a physics class. I always remember the professor in the physics class. His name was Dr. Weinstein, and I always imagined that he was destined to become a physics professor with that name, right? So Robert and I met in college at the University of Houston. Go Cougs! And he was actually working for the Texas Center for Superconductivity, which is actually an institution on the U of H campus. And he was separating this molecule that we'll talk a little bit more about later for a guy by the name of Dr. Paul Chu. Dr. Paul Chu one day came in as they were working on this molecule and said, hey, you guys are young guys. This material at the time, it was selling for $6,000 a gram. You're a bunch of young guys. This is a valuable material. Why don't you guys go start a company? My business partner, Robert, was from an entrepreneurial background and was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So he started it and then engaged me to help design the piece of equipment that would ultimately become our reactor for manufacturing a full ESS-60.
So now, how did you come across this molecule in the first place, which I understand to have won a Nobel Prize for its discoverers?
Yeah, so the way I was introduced to it was through my business partner, Robert, again, who was doing that separation process at the Texas Center for Superconductivity. I mean, the whole story is pretty fascinating because really three professors, Dr. Smalley, Dr. Curl, and Dr. Croto, back in 1985, discovered this third form of carbon. We're all kind of familiar with diamond. We're familiar with graphite. That's in our pencil lead. And they discovered the third form of carbon nanomaterials, and those are fullerenes. And they discovered them in 85. By 1996, they won the Nobel Prize for that particular discovery. So again, my exposure, because we're kind of in close proximity to Rice University, that's why Dr. Chu was working with the material. That's why my business partner was actually working for Dr. Chu and then engaged me so that I could help with that kind of fullerene production process.
Yeah, thank you for that. So why is this particular molecule so significant for research or for our understanding about science?
Yeah. So, and why did it ultimately bring me to your show? Yeah, it's from the beginning, it's a pretty, well, they won the Nobel Prize for the discovery, right? So that kind of maybe gives the right framework. The reason they won the Nobel Prize in the early days, I would tell people I manufacture, this. Actually, I've got, for those who are, I don't know if you put audio out, but for those who are actually watching, I'm actually holding up a model of the ESS-60 molecule. And really it's the best way to imagine it, if you imagine the soccer ball, the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So you have this spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. It's pretty amazing. It's big enough for any atom on the periodic chart to fit inside of it. There's actually a new symbol in chemistry because of the molecule. So we're all familiar with the @ symbol as it relates to email. Now you've got lanthanum. I'm going to get a little geeky here, but you've got lanthanum at C60 means lanthanum actually physically trapped inside the cage. So not covalently bonded to the exterior or ionically bonded to the exterior, physically trapped inside of it. In 1991, that's the year that I started my first carbon nanomaterial company, the 10 of the 10 most referenced research papers on the planet were all related to fullerenes, right? So that's how excited the community is. Now, one of the reasons is if you look, like one of these sides on this particular model actually has 6 sides on its surface, and that's actually the same as the benzene ring. Now, a lot of people don't know, we don't have modern society without the benzene ring. If you just look around wherever you're at right now, think about everything that's plastic, most medicines, detergents, those are all founded in the benzene ring. So really ubiquitous in our society. We don't have modern society. Well, that's one of the faces of this buckyball, of this ESS-60 molecule. And so they figured, well, this would be like a 3D version of benzene. And if benzene is so ubiquitous in society, then ultimately this ESS-60 molecule is going to be that predominant in society, which led, and I'll leapfrog a little bit, it led to them saying, hey, we've got to understand this material. If everyone's going to be impacted by this material, we need to know whether it's safe or not. It turns out that benzene is actually toxic and a known carcinogen. So they assumed that this ESS-60 molecule, really, at the time they call it carbon-60, they assumed this carbon-60 molecule would be poisonous. They assumed it would be carcinogenic and toxic. So they did this toxicity study. this will be the kind of the teaser for later. When they did this study, they gave rats water, rats olive oil, and then rats olive oil with the ESS60 molecule. Instead of being toxic, the rats given really the MyVital-C formula lived 90% longer, and they died with no tumors. Unlike the control group, that group given water all died with tumors. The Worcester rat is known to die with tumors at around 32 months. Our rats actually lived out to 62 months and again died with no tumors.
Wow, that's really amazing. So how did you two team up to help people sleep deeply and build their immunity? I mean, your formulation obviously is like a super critical component, but why did you and how did you meet and how did you actually team up?
Well, it's sort of the same reason that we're actually on your show, because when you get like-minded people together, then they're going to be talking about something that they're passionate about. So Chris and I share the passion of actually wanting to help people. So even though Chris is a research scientist and a research engineer, his passion is still ultimately to help people and to make a positive difference and a positive contribution to other people's lives. And that's been my focus as well. So we started talking very much about, well, how is COVID-19, how is this pandemic impacting people? And the impact is pretty obvious. The first thing that happens is people can't sleep. Well, why can't they sleep? Because of all the various emotions, which you listed in the introduction of the interview, whether it's sadness, sorrow, grief, fear, anxiety, loneliness, disconnection, guilt, shame, depression, rumination, etc. Now, once you start experiencing all those emotions, well, then the impact is on your body. Your body responds to those emotions. Your stress hormones increase, then you can't sleep, then your immune system is suppressed and lowered, then you can't digest, then you can't think clearly, and it becomes this loop. So Chris and I said, well, how can we help people? And it's pretty obvious what Chris does, because he has this formulation, MyVital-C, and I'm sure he's going to get a chance to tell you that tens of thousands of people have used it. The very thing they talk about, the very first thing they talk about is how well they sleep, and they haven't slept in a long time. Then they talk about the lessening of neck pain, back pain, etc. And all of my work is ultimately about helping you to remove those negative, agitative emotions. Now, I don't mean completely remove them, and I have a new audio book called Neutralize the Seven Emotions that are holding you hostage right now. So I just want to say first, even though we've all done it, and I do it too, we label emotions as positive and negative.
Right.
Even the negative emotions have a place in the right context, at the right time, in the right proportion, in the right situation. So sometimes you will need anger. If you need to protect your friend or your loved one or your family or an innocent bystander because they're being attacked, you need to generate that fight or flight response. You need that anger to jump in there and save that person. If we had no fear, then we would walk right in front of a car. So we need a balance of those emotions. The question is, what happens when we're stuck in fear, or we're stuck in sadness, or we're stuck in anxiety, or we're stuck in anger, and then it becomes rage? So my focus here is, let's look at how we're being impacted by the extraordinary insecurity, uncertainty, instability, the loss. The loss is on major fronts for all of us. Now, some people are actually celebrating the quietness, particularly the introverts. They're happy. And I've got clients like that who feel guilty. I spoke with a client yesterday who felt guilty that she was actually enjoying this time off, because usually during the day she's a full-time massage therapist, but her passion is art. Now that she's been furloughed from a very big spa, she's going and painting every day. So she feels good, but then she feels guilty for feeling good and actually getting to do what she wants to do. So the point here is, if we can take a whole new approach, what can we do to help people right now to strengthen their immune system, to sleep better, to have stronger and healthier relationships with people, to reevaluate their lives and say, what I once thought was meaningful is no longer meaningful. I don't need to follow these people on social media. I don't need to become the rat on the wheel, just doing everything to survive and not actually living. Not actually, living with passion and purpose. So this has been a great opportunity for people to reevaluate where they are, what they're doing, how they're doing, why they're doing it. And then, of course, we're all challenged. Can you really rise up to the challenge? Can you move beyond the obstacles, beyond the hurdles? Can you become hopeful, optimistic, resilient? Can you tap into your own psychological capital, your own psychological resources? And that's what I've been doing with the new audio book, Neutralize the Seven Emotions that are holding you hostage right now, by identifying that umbrella of emotions, giving you action steps to neutralizing them, giving you some very powerful transformational exercises, and then also giving you another gift, which is a guided meditation, which not only relaxes you, but gives you positive suggestions and helps you to tap into the inner resources, because your show is about divine insights. Well, we have insights. We have a higher self that we can tap into. We have other wisdom that is almost innate, or that we can tap into. And then, so Chris and I said, look, let's get together, because Chris's product is the biological, the physiological component of what other boost can we give to people so that they can get through this crisis, but come out at the end renewed. Because to be resilient doesn't just mean to be able to bounce back from the setback, the disappointment, the failure, the loss. It means to be able to bounce back with new insight, new wisdom, new understanding, and above all, with new motivation. You become a new person every time you overcome some sort of challenge. You shed an old identity, and it's not you become stronger, you become wiser, you become smarter, you become more self-aware. So that's our purpose and mission.
Thank you so much. And I just want to really highlight this idea. I know for many, many years, people in the the health industry were all about good vibes only. Just like, I'm going to only think of good things, positive things, the Abraham Hicks mindset around finding a better feeling thought, which is always great. But what I also notice is that it creates a lot of potential for people to be in denial when their life really isn't going that well. So instead of actually expressing all of these emotions they might be feeling, they're repressing them. And as we all know, it goes right into the body. So now they're in like the stress response. What's fascinating yeah, go ahead.
Well, you've made a great point, because if you look at even the great teachers, they don't say to you, ignore negative emotions. Even in Buddhism, the term there is referred to as agitative emotions. They don't even use the term negative. They use the term agitative. That means there's emotions that create agitation within you. If you talk about Viktor Frankl, how can you say to the Jewish people, well, change your vibe and you would have never ended up in the Holocaust? So my point is, if you look at someone like Viktor Frankl's whole premise was there is suffering that you just can't eradicate. It's going to occur. If you look at Buddhism, if you look at Christianity, or any of the religions, they recognize, they acknowledge that there is pain and suffering. It's part of the human experience. The question is, how can we respond to it? How can we find meaning in the suffering? How can we grow from it? How can we connect with other people? How can we express more love? How can we come more from the heart? So you said something that's really powerful. It's not about trying to avoid or deny the reality. You can be an optimist, but the ideal is to be what I refer to as a realistic optimist. In other words, if it's raining really heavy and the house is flooding, you don't say, well, I'm an optimist, don't worry about it, it'll all fix itself. You say, we need to go and get a bucket and we need to evacuate. So you assess the situation, you respond accordingly. If you have someone you love who's sick or has passed, you're not going to say, well, time for more good vibes. You are going to hurt. You are going to feel sorry. There is loss, and it's okay to experience that. The most important thing is, for how long do you stay in that pain? How long do you stay in that agitative emotion? And how do you respond to it? Do you keep feeding it? There's times you're going to get angry. There's times you're going to be frustrated. But again, these are all part of the human experience. We have night and day. What would happen if we had daylight all the time? What would happen if it was 80 degrees all day and all night? We wouldn't even be able to sleep. There needs to be the balance, the yin, the yang, the light, the dark, the up, the down. And what we're saying, and Chris really believes in what I teach here, is that it's about finding balance. It's about, you know, in the spiritual world, we talk about being centered. Well, being centered means being in the middle. It doesn't mean being avoiding or running away from everything. So again, in this audiobook, which I'm going to give to your audience for free, I acknowledge that there are these emotions. You talked earlier about the neurology, about the brain. Fear is part of our ability to survive. If there was no fear, we wouldn't be able to run away from danger. And we have this capacity, and we could end up talking for 3 hours about this, but within us, we have the capacity to commit good and the capacity to commit evil. I mean, this is recognized in every religion, in every teaching. The question is, which one are you going to focus on? Because we could all commit evil deeds. We could all be heroes and be willing to risk our lives to save someone else's life, or we could be the kind of person that could hurt someone. Because we've all had that thought. When someone hurts us, we automatically have the thought of wanting to hurt them. That's our initial reaction. And there we go into the brain. We go into the brain of fight or flight response.
Right.
So again, my teaching is acknowledge what you feel. Allow yourself to feel it. Don't deny who you are. If you feel sad, if you feel angry, if you feel depressed, if you feel lost, that's okay. Now, where do we go next? What do we do with that thought? What do we do with that emotion? Because it's all part of the totality. It's all part of the human experience.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know that when people can oftentimes, ruminate on the story that supports their belief system around why they're suffering, or just they're facing the suffering moment of having financial worries or potential loss of home, foundational elements, loss of job, isolation, not being able to touch people, all of these things can have a true impact on us. What I'm fascinated by is like the effect that this is having on the human body and the immune system. So Chris, can you talk a little bit about what impact there is on the lack of sleep on the body, and in particular the immune system?
Yeah, well, so the reality, and I kind of call this the horrible emotional sleep spiral, right? Because what happens is, Patrick's talked about all these emotions, and they can be negative emotions, and we can dwell on them, and we end up not getting enough sleep. And then when you don't get enough sleep, you actually are less able to manage your emotions. Patrick was just talking about, it's kind of a management issue where, yes, you need to feel them. And I like how he says in the book where it's okay to feel these emotions. That is okay. What you're going to do with them is what is important and what the book is about. And so when you've got a lack of sleep, you've got less of an ability to actually manage those emotions. And so you end up in this spiral. We know that good sleep affects your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. So if your mental well-being is reduced, then that's not good for your immune system. Your physical and your mental, if those are reduced, that's not good for your immune system. So we've got these kind of weakened immune systems because of sleep. There's a book called Why We Sleep by a Matthew Walker. It's an amazing book. It's also the scariest book that you'll ever read about sleep. You may not have known that there was a scary book about sleep that doesn't talk about nightmares, right? Because what it does is it goes through with scientific research and kind of the details of a scientist says, okay, I had this exercise, I restricted this amount of sleep, and their performance was reduced by this amount. So it talks about how your memory is affected. It talks about, I don't know if you know this, during daylight savings time, when we gain an hour, heart attacks actually go down. And when we lose an hour, heart attacks actually go up. Sleep impacts your cardiovascular health. And he also talks about how if you don't get enough sleep if you don't get any sleep for a number of days, you can actually, on a blood test, on a glucose blood test, show up as a diabetic, even though the only thing that's happened is you just haven't gotten sleep. So sleep is so paramount to our immune system. I feel like as a society, we know it, right? We know, I think anyone could say, yeah, it helps your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And it's so very important. Well, unless there's something else to do. And then, you do that and then you get your sleep later. I think that's kind of how our society looks at it. And it's not how we should be looking at it at all. Like, it is good for your emotional, physical, and mental well-being. And you should be doing things that can help you sleep.
And I think there's a couple of other really important points to build on what Chris is saying. Matthew Walker also says this, and it's quite funny the way he says it. He says, we're the only real creatures on the planet who go out of our way for no good reason at all to avoid sleeping or to cut back our sleeping when it's actually harmful to us. The other important component of sleep is it is designed to strengthen and build our immune system. And then the third point is we don't recognize when we haven't had enough sleep. So if you've only slept 6 instead of 8 hours, your brain won't tell you, listen, I'm not functioning at 100%. So in other words, you don't know when you've been cognitively impaired by a lack of sleep. And the fourth key point, during your period of sleep, there is a period when your brain is actually working to focus on healing and processing some of the emotions that you've been experiencing during the day. So the brain is also designed to resolve and heal some of the emotions that you go to see a therapist for, that you come to me and say, Patrick, I'm having this problem with sadness, anger, etc. If you're able to get more sleep in the right way, your brain is also working through that, which is why you have specific dreams. So we want to encourage people to sleep well. We want to encourage people to get something that boosts their immune system. And we want to encourage people to help them to deal with their emotions. And Chris made a good point about what I teach in the book. The actual wording that I have in the book, and which I use with every client, is you're allowed to feel whatever you feel. Whatever you feel is important. Whatever you feel does matter, and it does make a difference. Now, as Chris said, I say in the book, what are you going to do with those feelings? How are you going to respond? Some of us feel guilty for feeling guilty. Some of us feel guilty for feeling good. So again, what are we doing? We're actually taking emotion and either making it worse or building on it or feeding it. Let's say you feel angry. Well, how do you go from anger to rage? You keep feeding the thought. You keep feeding the emotion. If you say, that person did such and such to me, or the government, or this person, etc., then you keep feeding it, and then that anger becomes rage, or it just stays within you, and then now you're operating with the emotion of anger. And you talked earlier, whether it's about Abraham Hicks or other spiritual teachers who talk about our vibrations. Well, in what emotion are you living most of the time? Are you living mostly in joy, mostly in gratitude, mostly in anger, mostly in resentment, mostly in bitterness, etc.? All of these emotions have an impact on our body. And we didn't explain it scientifically, but stress raises your cortisol. Stress makes your heart beat faster. Stress increases your blood pressure. Stress disrupts your sleep. All of that is you are going into fight or flight response. So the next time that you are driving, and I know we don't have that problem right now, but we will soon as everything continues to reopen. But when there's a lot of traffic or someone cuts you off, and incidentally, I have been cut off even when there's been no traffic, because there's the people that are very much like me that want to drive really fast. So, yeah. But when you do that and you start to get angry and you cuss that person out, you're releasing your body adrenaline. Adrenaline is a poison when it's not used for what it's intended. If you are trying to run away from the dinosaur, from the bear, from the caveman, the adrenaline's great. But if you're sitting in a car and the adrenaline just moving through your body, that is a poison. It turns your body into a catabolic state. That means it's breaking down everything rather than anabolic, building up. So be aware that when you hold on to, when you're harboring that resentment for something someone did 10 years ago, when you say, I'll never ever forgive that person for such and such, then you really are releasing poisons in your body. That really is a poison within you. And also it's about being gentler on yourself. I teach, forgive yourself for being human. Now, what does that mean? We're all imperfect. We all make mistakes, but we believe we're not meant to make mistakes. We believe that, particularly in America, we believe you're meant to be happy 24 hours a day. Now, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you happy? What can I do to make you happy? Because you really got to be happy 24 hours a day. And now that we've been hit with this pandemic and people have lost their jobs and there's people that are sick and people that are dying and uncertainty and instability, you're not allowed to be unhappy. Now, come on, get happy. And then we make ourselves worse. So really it's about completely reevaluating the way that we interact with our world and within ourselves. How can we change that for the better? And again, I keep coming back to saying you need to work on the whole, the 360, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual realms. Your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, what you're feeling, how you're reacting, your physical body. What are you feeding your physical body? What exercise are you doing? What yoga are you doing? What meditation are you doing? Spiritual, are you living from your heart? Are you forgiving? Are you being more compassionate? Are you setting out with a mission, with passion and with purpose? Are you trying to help people? And then part of the physical is also looking for those supplements that will help you. Because incidentally, if your brain is off, and I mean, if you're not getting the right nutrients and you're short of certain amino acids, you'll have cravings, you'll have obsessions, you'll have addictions, or you'll feel lethargic, or you'll feel sad, or you'll feel dull. So you've got to look at yourself as an entire being. You're not just a machine that's meant to be happy 24 hours a day. So again, now that's why I also believe in Chris's product.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And it just, you know, as somebody who has works with clients a lot around, spiritual wellness and life, as a life coach, and having my own experiences of lack of sleep. I'm just remembering the times when, you might get this adrenal kick on, and now your adrenals are on, and you're in that fight or flight as you described. And to me, at times it was like arguing with my partner. I could win the argument if I stayed up all night thinking about it and ruminating about it, but it wasn't really great for my sleep. And I know that, a lot of people, there's some go-tos, right? Some go-tos when we think about how to support the body getting sleep. People talk about melatonin. They talk about increased magnesium an hour before bed, Valerian Root, sublingual stuff, all the types of things. So I'm curious, from your experience, both of you, what are some simple methods or exercises that people can implement right now in their lives to help them sleep better? Chris?
Yeah. So let me share like 3 very specific tips right now. And I've got to warn you up front. One of them, the audience members may not like so much. One of them, and these are all about sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is kind of this fancy word for saying those habits that you have that allow you to have a sleep process to get to sleep, right? And in the case of, you mentioned Valerian Root, that you can find in a nice tea called Sleepy Time tea. I actually believe in Valerian Root. It does a good job of quieting your mind. And so having that cup of tea could be part of your sleep hygiene. So I'm just going to go over kind of 3 points, and one of them has a couple of points. The first is, if you're going to take any naps, right? So we may not be working as much now. We may be home all the time. 25% of the population is out of work, right? If you're going to take a nap, and whether it's voluntary, whether it's because you're on the couch not doing anything or whatever, make sure you use a timer and make sure you don't nap more than 30 minutes. So anything that's over 30 minutes is going to detrimentally impact your sleep that night. And you really do want that. In that book called Why We Sleep, it talks about sleep opportunity, and you want to make sure that you have I think they say like 6.5 to 8 hours of sleep opportunity. If you're getting more than a 30-minute nap, and by the way, that book does highly support naps too, but not over 30 minutes.
And not after 4 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah. Also not after 4, because it's too close to when you're hopefully about to go to sleep.
I assume it affects your circadian rhythm.
Exactly. Next, I'm gonna go with manage your electronic devices. So it's well known that iPhones and iPads and computer monitors actually give off blue light, and it's well known that that blue light that comes off of those devices interrupts your circadian rhythm, like you just mentioned, Travis. And so what you want to do is, each of these devices, in the Apple, it's called Night Shift. That's a feature that you can turn on, and you want to make sure that really right about the time that the sun is going down, your device is like winding down the blue light. On Android, it depends on which Android device, right? It comes multiple devices. Comfort View is one, blue light filter is another. And you want to make
Nightlight. Nightlight is on my laptop.
It's on your laptop, right? So find that feature. It's a blue light feature or a nighttime feature or a nightlight feature. Do a Google search, but use that. And I actually, Patrick and I would say, an hour before you go to bed, turn off all electronics. Don't be there with your blue light on and go, okay, great, I can like be in bed. He's saying 2
hours.
2 to 3. 2 to 3 is what I do. That's my regimen. I actually teach, turn off everything that's negative as early as you can, starting in the morning actually. But I keep my nightlight filter on my laptop all day long, unless I'm doing something in Photoshop and I need to look at the full spectrum of colors, because what the nightlight filter does, as Travis mentioned, is it disrupts your circadian rhythm. I actually turn off electronic devices. They're never in my bedroom, because you want to keep them away. And I switch off the computer 2 to 3 hours before I'm about to go to sleep, because what we've forgotten is how we're designed. We're designed to prepare for sleep. It's a gradual transition. It's not like and then boom. You can't do that. And one last thing about the nightlight, and I want to hear what the rest of Chris has to say, is that if you are working on the computer and you leave that nightlight on, you'll find yourself at midnight still wide awake, because the nightlight is keeping you awake.
It's actually convincing your body that it's still full daylight outside and you should be out foraging, not preparing for sleep. And so, yeah, that's why you want to turn that off. And then the last one, again, some of your audience, I know Patrick doesn't really mind this one as much, but steer clear of alcohol. The reality is people are like, hey, I can have one drink or I can have two drinks, and then that'll help me sleep. In that book, Why We Sleep, Matthew Walker talks not only about the $2 billion sleep aid industry, but also its parallels with alcohol. So most of these quote unquote sleep aids, we'll do air quotes here, they're actually designed for you to take them and they knock you out right before you, right at bedtime or right after you take them. And then you wake up later in the day, and what it's done in your body is it's released the chemical pressure to desire sleep. So you wake up without this desire to sleep, feeling rested, but you haven't gotten your REM sleep, or in that book, they talk about in-REM sleep. Both of those are very healing sleep. That's when your body actually is getting all of the healing done. It's kind of like if somebody were to hit you in the head and knock you unconscious for 12, 18 hours or whatever, you don't wake up going, wow, that was very nice rest. Thank you very much for doing that for me. That's what these sleep aids do.
They're anesthetics.
Yeah.
They're anesthetics, really.
They just knock you out. And alcohol does the same thing. So, they typically say that a typical drink will be processed out of your body in an hour. I would say, let's go with Patrick's 2 hours before, make sure that the alcohol is out of your system before you go to sleep. If you want to have a glass of wine, there are some studies that suggest a glass of red wine in particular is healthy. I'm actually of the opinion that it's the people who have those routines and drink one glass of wine for the enjoyment actually have this kind of positive mindset, and I don't think they ever factor that out when they're doing those types of studies. But if you're going to have a glass of wine, make sure you're done, at least 2 hours before. And I like to, it's interesting to mention this book, the $2 billion industry, this $2 billion sleep aid industry, and how it's in a stark contrast to my product. Most of my customers actually take the product in the morning. They report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. And I'll actually end up giving another tip here for how to sleep better. There are not many things that you can do in the morning to positively impact your sleep that night. One, again, that's what my customers report with our product. Another is get exposed to natural sunlight early in the morning, right? So get that circadian rhythm, like, hey, now it's daytime, because your body does understand the rough time frame of how long it's supposed to be bright outside. And then as it gets dark, you've already kind of acclimated or timed your body with that. And the other one is exercise. So certainly as opposed to not getting exercise, if you exercise in the morning, you will sleep better that night. So that's actually a couple of bonus sleep tips. Make sure you get exposure to the sunlight early in the day or early in the morning, and then exercise. Now, the exercise doesn't have to be in the first thing in the morning, but make sure that it's also similar to turning off electronic devices. Make sure, I would say that's more like 4 or 5 hours prior to going to sleep, because you don't want to try and go to sleep with this elevated heart rate from whatever exercise you've been doing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you were going to share something else, Patrick.
Well, in my audiobook, and I know that you're going to be asking us for the link, because we're giving you this audio to your audience, we're giving the audiobook and the guided meditation for free. But I do also summarize 17 critical tips on how to sleep better, most of which have been drawn from Matthew Walker's book, along with other research. And I want to say this briefly, because this might help. When we were talking before about sleep supplements, and this is something that happened with one of my clients. Ambien, anyone that's used Ambien knows that it can do the opposite. It can actually get you sleepwalking at night. And there's been studies where they were using Ambien to try to wake people up from a coma. So you got to stop and think, what do some of these supplements actually do to you when you take, and I remember I was working in a rehab clinic in California, and we had a head psychiatrist. Every time any new patient would come in, he would look at the regimen that they were already on. And I remember saying to him, listen, I've got a new client and he's experiencing anxiety and he's on this particular medication and this one. He goes, oh, you want to take him off this medication? I said, but that's a medication for anxiety. He said, yeah, but it can also create anxiety. And I said, that's bizarre. And that's the bizarre thing of some of this medication. I'm not saying don't ever use medication. Medication can be a great bridge, and it can be definitely required in a time of crisis. But be careful that you're turning to things to try to solve problems which you can solve.
Thank you. And I think, as someone I've had my own experiences with lack of sleep, in particular, having PTSD, ADHD, and a system that basically can be mostly manic or having a higher level of energy than most people has been in my life, more difficult to find the other side. And so it's great to hear such wonderful additional tips and techniques. I mean, I remember one, it sounds quite simple, but going to bed at the same time every night so that your body gets into a pattern, so you're not having these variant things where your body isn't able to get into a schedule. And I love what you said as well, Chris, about the alcohol. I know that, there's a lot of science around having a glass of wine, the health benefits, the tannin, all that stuff, the antioxidants. But for somebody who might be, suffering from substance abuse disorder, even that one glass is going to be the last one that they should be having at any given time. So it's really about what's going to be best for you, and to just really be patient and kind with yourself. I know when we get into those thought patterns that you were talking about earlier, Patrick, the rumination, even just noticing that, oh my gosh, I've just been having a lot of thoughts around this situation, and the ability to separate yourself from your thoughts and say, I'm just having the thought. I don't need to engage with it. I don't need to argue with it. I'll just notice it's there and just have it put over there.
Second tip on rumination, make a decision. Often we're ruminating because we're constantly trying to work out, what do I do? Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I do this? Do I do that? Make a decision and stick to it. Successful people usually make a decision and then they stick to it, unless suddenly there's a flood of evidence that says this is the wrong decision. But if you think back to your situation when you were ruminating, was it because really there was a decision that needed to be made that wasn't made? So sometimes we're in an unhappy relationship and we're constantly thinking about this and this and that, and we're afraid to make the tough decision. Whatever that tough decision, maybe the tough decision is I need to speak to my partner, or I need to make this decision and I need to alert my partner. So with rumination, it's similar to worry. Worry is negative imagination. You're constantly thinking about what's bad. But with rumination, obviously you're right. Separate yourself from the thought. In meditation, the idea is to allow the thought to pass you rather than to jump in and keep feeding the thought. The second component is have a look. Is it that you're not making a decision? And of course, we all know this is a really tough time, because it's very hard for me to say to you, hey, Travis, what's your 5-year plan? When right now we don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. Right. So now we're being challenged again to shed the old identity, and for the next few months we can't make a 5-year plan. We don't know what's going. We don't know what's going to happen with this area, with cruise ships, with airlines, with this, with that. So you've got to make decisions sometimes on a daily basis. And in my book, I talk about that. I say you've got to have a daily routine. Set goals for the day. What time are you going to wake up? What time are you going to go to sleep? What time are you going to eat? What are you going to do in between? What goals can you achieve today so that you're actually feeling like you're achieving something? Not about just being busy for the sake of being busy, but finding meaning in small goals, finding meaning in helping other people and making decisions, rather than saying, I'm a complete victim, I'm helpless, hopeless, and powerless. No, you have great power. The first thing you can control is your own thoughts and emotions. Then identify what else can I control, and start to control that. Let go of the rest. You cannot control. These are discussions I have constantly with friends. They keep calling and saying, oh, in Miami Beach, the beach is going to open up next week. And I know that that's not going to happen. And then the next week, it's a new date. It's a new date. It's a new date. And I said, look, why don't we just accept what we can't control, which is the beach is closed. So what can we do? Put the energy there. When they open up the beach, I'll be back on the beach.
Wonderful. So you mentioned this book, and obviously, and I'm so grateful that you're offering that for the audience. How can the audience get this free ebook, Neutralize the 7 Emotions that are holding you hostage right now and keeping you from peace of mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go to myvitalc.com/divine insight. Just like your show, and then they can get. But by the way, we're not farming emails. It's free. We don't need your email. Just go there. You can listen to it right there on that webpage, or you can download it.
And the guided meditation.
Both, yeah, they're right there. I also am offering a coupon to anybody in your audience if they're interested in trying My Vital C. And just to give a little perspective, right? We talked about the impact of sleep, and that's certainly what brought Patrick and I together in kind of joining your show. There's really, it supports your immune system in 5 different ways, right? It's a known antibacterial, it's a known antiviral, it's an antioxidant that at least one study has shown is 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. So it's an impressive antioxidant. When it comes to anti-inflammatory, you have to be really careful with the FDA. So what I'll say is that it fits very nicely in an anti-inflammatory diet. And that diet, like the Mediterranean diet, has been associated with reduced inflammation diseases like reduced arthritis, reduced Alzheimer's, and certainly the Mediterranean diet is associated with one of the blue zones. That's an area where people tend to live a lot longer than the average human. So it fits naturally in an anti-inflammatory diet. And then finally, just because our customers are so often reporting this better sleep and the fact that sleep helps your mental, physical, and emotional well-being, it's important in this time to be forthright and say, look, we're not saying that this is going to significantly impact whatever experiences you might have with COVID. I just like to share it because it's the reason that I actually FedEx extra bottles to my mom, and I have my mom taking extra servings each day because of those 5 reasons. And for your customer, for anybody in your audience, if they use the coupon code Divine Insight, they'll get $15 off of their first purchase.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that generous offer, and I think, it's just funny you mentioned anti-inflammatory diet because that's exactly what I'm on. And because there's so many diet fads about what's gonna serve your system and what's not. It's like, just, figure out what's best for you and try to have a low inflammation. Of course, it's going to support your immune system as well. But anyway, thank you so much. And I just want to ask, is there anything else that either of you would like to share about your work or how folks can learn more about you before we close out the show?
Patrick?
Well, I thought I would just touch, since we've been talking about this throughout, that ultimately we have control over our thoughts and emotions. The problem is that we often think we don't, or we don't know how to control those thoughts or emotions. And you talked earlier about PTSD, that we can also still be feeling the consequences of things that happened to us in our childhood. Children watch, they copy. They listen, they believe what they're told. They have an individual experience and they make an inaccurate interpretation around that experience, often blaming themselves. And the 4th way that we learn as children is we absorb the emotions of the house around us. The other thing that I want to say briefly is that very few people talk about today is behavioral epigenetics. Behavioral epigenetics is a science that proves that you are actually inheriting personality, temperament, and even suffering from your great-grandmother or your great-great-grandmother or even further up. And it's in your genes. So here we are, the result of what we experienced as a child. Some things we inherited from our parents and some things we've inherited from our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents. And we're not consciously aware of, well, how do I change it? If I say to you, Patrick, you got to forgive. You got to be more compassionate. Go, well, I don't know how to do that. This is frustrating me. So I developed organically over many years this technique that you referred to in your introduction. Subconscious rapid transformation technique, a way of helping people to let go of those thoughts, let go of those emotions, change the belief, forgive yourself and the people around you, and to do so without reliving the pain. You don't need to relive the pain to let go of something. And so I've been doing this technique long before we were forced to do everything over the internet or over the phone. I've been doing this technique with clients around the world over the phone for 10 to 15 years.
Including me.
Yeah. And the reason it's so successful is because when you're on the phone, you can be laying down on your bed and you're not worried about having to get in the car, get dressed, and then go through the traffic, find parking, and then you're in front of someone and you're thinking, oh, I'm crying, or does my makeup look okay, etc. It's where you can actually be really relaxed and open up and trust. But if you have someone that's guiding you, you can go back to that old traumatic experience without reliving it. And Travis, I've got clients, I've worked with clients, like one lady who, when she was 5, she was witnessing her mother being raped. And she tried 2 or 3 times to get out of the bedroom, to get out of the house to help. So when she walks in, you know she's got all this trauma and it's in her body. As soon as she starts talking about it, what happens? She begins to cry and begins to relive the trauma. And I have to go, stop, hold on, pause. And then I say, what we're going to do from here on is you're not going to relive the trauma, because every time you relive the trauma, you can't even help yourself. And I can't help you because you go into that fight or flight response. And at that point, there's nothing anyone can do. They can try to calm you down, but we can't help you to let go of it and to break that attachment.
Right.
And what I've done successfully with clients is to break that attachment.
Beautiful. Thank you. And it just reminds me as well that the idea that, you know, what we do in the bedroom, you know, or around our home is like, it's behavioral. So, and there's really only 2 things you should be doing in your bed, and one of them is sleep. So cut out everything else.
What's the other
that
one?
You're doing. You know, we'll let your imagination fill in that one. But it's a pleasurable experience, but it isn't sleep. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So I want to thank you both so much for joining me today, for sharing your incredible wisdom and insight, your wonderful partnership, and everything that you're bringing out into the world. And thank you all for watching or listening wherever you're doing so. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Travis.